And now,
it's 10 a.m.
Let's just get down to it.
And it's time for your sports fix.
Strap yourselves in, folks.
From two guys who have covered the teams you're passionate about for years.
We are professionals.
This is Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone. Happy 2026 to everybody out there. Big news week. Big news couple of days, and we will start off with Mitch Harper, our BYU Insider, who is joining us via Airlink, which means if you're watching us on YouTube, you can actually watch Mitch as well. With the big news that Jay Hill has departed BYU in favor of Michigan, joining Kyle Whittingham's staff, long rumored, and finally official. Actually, as of this morning, though the report really broke yesterday. What's going on, Mitch?
Hey, Ben. Happy to be on.
So at what point did you feel like this was, realistic, this was going to happen? Jay Hill was likely going to be following Kyle Whittingham to Ann Arbor?
When Kyle Whittingham got the Michigan job.
That early?
Yeah, because it just makes all the sense in the world for Jay Hill. And, BYU was never going to just, throw their hands up because BYU's got more resources than ever before. And they're a highly resourced program. And as coaches told me last month in bowl prep, Kalani's contract extension puts BYU in a place where they can obtain anything they want in college football, and it can put them on a platform that gives them a chance to, be among college football's great programs. But at the same time, Jay Hill's never had the chance to be the defensive coordinator for his mentor, and you see the emotion that Jay Hill had when I asked him about his relationship with Kyle Whittingham leading up to the Utah game in the build-up for that game in October, and if that was severed at all by crossing rivalry lines, and it was anything but the sort. So it makes all the sense in the world. And you see, too, where, again, the narratives, which sometimes win the day more than actual games in college football, because people want to just live up to a narrative in this sport. If you're an AD, what's an easier sell as a potential next head coach? Michigan DC or BYU DC? I mean, whether it's fair or not, I think Jay Hill as BYU DC is one heck of a coach. But as Michigan DC, a little more glamorous, a little bit more opportunity. Look at what Kentucky did in this coaching carousel. They hired the Oregon OC. Glamorous. So it made all the sense in the world to me, and I can't fault him for that, because when you get a head coach that's completely aligned with the way that you view defensive football and do it at a blue blood program, makes all the sense in the world.
We haven't seen contract numbers coming out here. Do you think money played a big role in it, or do you think BYU is able to pay similar numbers?
BYU can compete. I mean, they're this is no longer the BYU of old where it's simply just do more with less. I mean, they've got Kevin Young, they've got Kalani Sitake holding off the NBA, the Penn States of the world to get coaches. Again, and Jay Hill has had a great experience at BYU. I'm not going to speak for him, but he has had a lot of success. He's completely been great with Kalani Sitake. I mean, he even said that leading up to the Georgia Tech game and the Pop-Tarts Bowl, he said how Kalani's one of the best guys to work with in college football. But this is just such a unique opportunity that popped up that's hard to deny. And one thing about Jay Hill that I've learned in these 3 years covering him at BYU, the man wants to be on the biggest stages possible. That was one of the reasons he left Weber State, because he wanted the excitement back of being in just massive stages in the sport. And Michigan, to its credit, they play in some of the biggest stages, the biggest venues. And what an opportunity for him. So makes all the sense to me again that, but BYU is competitive. This is not, and that's where I think BYU fans should be excited about the future, because again, 10 years ago, you lose someone like a Jay Hill, you feel like all is lost. That's not the case anymore. You had a contract extension to maintain Kalani Sitake, and every time that he's been asked to go hire someone, it's been a really good move. He got Ty Detmer handed to him when he took the head coaching job because he wanted to be the head coach. The defensive coordinator spot, he went to someone he tried to teach into being the defensive coordinator because he had a limited budget in independence, and they still had, out of 5 out of the 7 years that Kalani Sitake was there, they were top 50 defensively. They had a top 4 defense one year, top 15 another. But Kalani Sitake knows defensive football. And he's also one of the most well-respected coaches now because he's got a resume that says that guy's there for the long haul. And now that you're paying money as an institution, you're going to have a nice pool of candidates to pull from that say, oh, you're going to make a lot of money. Oh, you got a head coach that's stable. He's not leaving anywhere. He's made that clear. And Kalani Sitake, a lot of coaches say that sort of stuff, like, I'm not leaving. Kalani Sitake is BYU football. He wants to be there for the long haul. If you're a defensive coordinator, why would you not want that opportunity? And then it can elevate you to whatever heights you want to go to in the profession. So this is no longer a program that's just suddenly you go to BYU and it's a career graveyard, or it's just a career where you're done. It's just BYU and that's it for you. You can achieve whatever you want to at BYU. And I think that's what's reason for excitement moving forward for BYU football.
What is the future fallout, or what is the next steps, I guess, within the defensive staff at BYU with Jay Hill departing? Are names leaving with him? Is that not expected?
You have to retain the staff and get a defensive coordinator in place. You know, someone like a General Guilford, I think, is important in all of this. You know, Jay Hill carried over General Guilford from the previous defensive staff at BYU. General Guilford's the lone holdover from Kalani's first coaching staff in 2016. He's been there every step of the way these past 10 years. Jay Hill elevated General Guilford since Jay Hill had been at BYU these past 3 years as the defensive passing game coordinator. General Guilford's an ace recruiter in Southern California. Excellent. Some of the best connections in that part of the country. So he would be someone that's a top priority. And also, too, with General Guilford, you know, I look at him as someone that is someone you look at strongly if you're Kalani Sitake as a defensive coordinator. It's risky because whenever you just, you know, replace a outstanding decorated resume like Jay Hill, you want to get someone like that again. But I will say General Guilford, I think, has evolved in a way to me where he's got defensive coordinator potential. When he first arrived at BYU, no, he was just probably a position coach, but he's producing NFL draft picks, NFL players out of the secondary at BYU. Before Kalani Sitake arrived, that wasn't happening. You went almost 20 years without secondaries or cornerbacks going to the NFL. And Gennaro has really taken, you know, the best of, you know, Jay Hill, you know, the previous regime with Kalani Sitake and Kalani Sitake. It's a really good coach. So, and it would make a lot of sense if Jay Hill wanted to take him over to Michigan. So I think he'd be a top guy that you got to prioritize if you're Kalani Sitake. And does that factor into the defensive coordinator conversation? I think that's something that Kalani has to think about.
What do you think Gary Anderson's role is going forward at BYU?
You know, it's interesting because he's such a nice piece to this staff. And with analysts being able to coach on the field and practices, what a nice luxury BYU's had. You know, to have Gary Anderson and Chad Kahaha as analysts, guys that have so much experience, so much background in the game of football to help with this defense the past few years. It's been a huge luxury for BYU. You know, I really wonder what Gary Anderson wants. Does he want to be back in a spotlight role? Being an analyst at BYU, he was loving it these past couple of years. I mean, just best spot. Just thoroughly happy being at BYU and being an analyst. Does he want to get back into the grind of then adding the dynamic of recruiting? Because as an analyst, yeah, you get a coach on the field, but you don't have to worry about recruiting. Yeah, you're probably aware of personnel that's being targeted and whatnot, but you're not making those Zoom calls. You're not doing off-campus spring evaluation period stuff. That's a big change. You know, so that's where I kind of wonder what does he want going forward? Because he's experienced the highest of highs in the sport. I mean, he's coached in the Big Ten as a head coach. He's coached in the Pac-12. He's done all these different things. So, but Gary Anderson was huge these past few years, and someone that worked right side by side with Jay Hill in that press box when they were calling games and defense. So he would be someone to me that you'd want to retain as well, whether that's an analyst. I mean, in a perfect world, I think you add him and Gennaro as the co-DCs. I think that would be a home run, I think, for BYU. But you know, again, what does Gary Anderson want? Because again, he's not someone he's experienced all of this in coaching. Does he want to get back in it and be out of the analyst behind the scenes role, if you will?
What does J.U. Hill's departure mean for the transfer portal?
You could have some losses, and someone that you'd monitor definitely would be Faletau Satawala. And just because that relationship was so strong in the recruiting process, from when Jay Hill arrived at BYU from Weber State, there's a handful of guys that you look at and say he formed really close relationships with. Faletau Satawala, Hunter Clegg, players like that probably don't come to BYU if not for Jay Hill. And so Faletau Satawala, second-team All-American this past season, he would be someone that he can play anywhere. And if BYU can retain him, that would be huge for BYU. But same time, like if he goes to Michigan as well, I understand that as well. I mean, I think the thing is with all of this, I think a lot of these fan bases in the state are just panicking right now. All these teams are 1 year. And look, you want to build a culture, and Kalani's doing that, and he's built that with BYU, but it's just all these teams are 1 year deals, and it's all business for the players and the coaches now. And you're constructing the best possible roster you can. If Faletau Satawala potentially left, and BYU would love to retain him, like he's someone that you absolutely would love to, dig deep into that rev share and give him a nice cut of money because he's that good. He could be one of the best safeties in the Big 12 next year. But if he left, you don't fault him either because there's plenty of safeties that would love to take that spot too. Again, BYU is operating a space where the reported enhanced budget with NIL, you're going to have options. So nothing is just a doomsday scenario. I think, the player that is the most critical in retention is obviously someone like a Bear Bachmeier. That's on the offensive side. But because of the quarterback position, everything else, though, there's always personnel. There's always guys that are ready to step up and be the next big thing. I think people like what they know. They like the familiarity, and you just want to retain it. But you didn't win the Big 12. You got to go take it another step further. And how do you do that? The portal is the quickest way to doing that, because high school players, even though it's a great top 20 recruiting class, top 25 rather, you can't bank on those guys to step in and be instant contributors to put you over the hump over Texas Tech. You got to fill the gaps with the portal no matter what it is. And whoever ends up being the next DC, that's going to be the challenge in front of them to put him over the hump. And someone like a Faletau Satawala would be ideal in retaining, but also you got to supplement this entire this defense in certain areas to get it to a higher level.
What do you expect to happen with Isaiah Glasker? Does this change anything for him?
I think it could possibly change. I mean, he's someone that could go to the NFL. I think this year was not as productive as last season, but Isaiah Glasker is an NFL talent. And, he's formed a really great relationship with Jay Hill. He's got 1 year of eligibility remaining. I could see him going to Michigan potentially. But I think also BYU could be in the cards for him too.
We've seen PK on the morning show discuss maybe Aaron Roderick making the jump from BYU, going back to Utah. Have you heard anything similar with that? Do you think there's some concern that A-Rod might not be the offensive coordinator at BYU next season?
There's definitely been talks for sure, and I've heard similar. And look, I think Aaron Roderick's been really good for BYU this past really 5 seasons. What he's done with the quarterback position, BYU is getting back to a place where it's a bit of a quarterback factory, and that's what Kalani Sitake challenged Aaron Roderick, or really any offensive coordinator that takes that role since he became the head coach, is to get back to having a factory at BYU. All the quarterbacks that he's had outside of probably Keaton Slovis have really been good for BYU, but even Keaton Slovis is playing in the NFL. He's got an opportunity. So I think that A-Rod's done a really good job. And for someone like him, but listen to opportunities, create leverage. I mean, I think that, again, it's just all a business. And the thing is that, I think BYU, though, is in a really good spot with their quarterback pipeline now and going forward. That, to me, BYU. But yeah, I've heard that there's been talks as well.
Names outside of the program that you think might be a candidate for the D coordinator job now that Jay Hill is gone?
USC defensive line coach Sean Nua, Florida State defensive coordinator Tony White, former Cal head coach Justin Wilcox. Those would be some names that I'd look at that would make a lot of sense.
Mitch, appreciate you jumping on. I know it's a very busy time. I know you're keeping an eye on the transfer portal as well. Find all of his coverage at KSLSports.com. Thanks for jumping on, Mitch.
Thanks.
There he is, Mitch Harper, giving us a breakdown on the latest with BYU and the jump from Jay Hill to go from BYU to Michigan, which was kind of the first thought right out of the gate. And Kyle Whittingham waited until after Utah had finished their bowl game to start to announce his coaching staff, and a couple of more names falling out there. Jason Beck obviously following him as well. We will talk about that with Steve Bartle. He's going to join us coming up at 11 o'clock, plus some transfer portal names for Utah, including Smith Snowden that has gone into the portal. So interesting and exciting. You know, you hate to lose these guys. Jay Hill changed the culture at BYU dramatically. You know, there was, I thought, a very clear before and after with the seriousness of BYU football before Jay was there and after. And look, a lot of that has to do with Kalani continuing to get better at the job, but Jay was a major upgrade at that position. Jason Beck was the best offense we've seen at Utah under Kyle Whittingham probably ever. I know there were some very solid offenses with Cam Rising, and when Utah had a good offense, they were very dangerous defensively, and they were very dangerous on the big picture, which is why they won 10 games again this year. Having to replace that is no guarantee. I think I have a little bit more faith that BYU will be able to find an adequate defensive coordinator because Kalani can do the job if he has to. If he has to put more attention on that side of the ball to buoy it, then that Utah will be able to easily replace Jason Beck. That doesn't mean it's impossible, certainly, but Jason Beck was really cooking at Utah there.
Especially if you look at who's making the hires, right? How many hires has Jason Beck made as Utah's head coach? Well, none yet. So we'll see what that means. Plus, not only is Jason Beck gone, but basically the whole offensive staff is leaving as well, where it's still TBD as to which assistants are going to be joining Jay Hill at Michigan. So, yeah, Utah's offense could look completely different than it did last year.
Yeah, BYU's defense could look completely different. I think that's the bizarre part of it. Names you're already losing just because they're seniors or going to the NFL. And then, if you lose a Glasgow or a Satawala, some of these names are going to be major in the state. And then, of course, Smith Snowden enters the transfer portal. I don't rule anyone out ever from returning, but it kind of didn't seem like that was going to be the direction there. We'll see. We'll see what the offensive side of the ball looks like. Does Utah's quarterback next season see on the roster already? I don't know. We saw a lot of Devin Dampier in the bowl game for Utah, and he was probably his best game. I thought he was fabulous in the bowl game. We did not see a whole lot of Bird Ficklin and wasn't used all that effectively when he was out there. So we'll see what this looks like for Utah. We'll continue to break this down coming up next in the top three stories. Stick around. Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.